she didn't just beat the defending champion. She sent shockwaves through the entire women's draw, and when the dust settled on center court, even the world too was left stunned. Not because she lost her own match, but because she watched a 21-year-old from the Philippines rewrite history in front of her eyes. Elena Rybakina had come to Wimbledon as the Australian Open champion, the number 2 seed, and one of the heavy favorites to lift the Venus Rosewater dish for a second time. But as she walked off court 1 after her own shock exit, the news from center court hit her like a thunderbolt. Alexandra Eala had just dismantled Iga Swiatek, the defending champion, in straight sets. The bottom half of the women's draw had been blown wide open. Rybakina's own hopes of a second Wimbledon crown and a shot at the world one ranking had evaporated in a 7-6-4, 6-1 loss to Elise Mertens. But the story that would dominate headlines wasn't her defeat. It was the fearless Filipina who had just made history on center court. Was this the day Alexandra Eala shattered expectations and announced herself as the most dangerous player in the draw? It was the day that shattered the women's draw at Wimbledon. 2 gaping holes were blasted into the bottom half of the bracket on Saturday, July 4, 2026. The defending champion fell. The Australian Open champion fell, and a 21-year-old from the Philippines emerged as the most dangerous player left standing. The chaos began on court 1. Elena Rybakina, the 2 seed, the 2022 Wimbledon champion, who had doubled her Grand Slam tally by winning the Australian Open earlier that year, walked onto the court with hopes of a second crown. She walked off in disbelief. Belgian 25th seed Elise Mertens dismantled her 7-6-4, 6-1, producing one of the biggest upsets of the championships. Rybakina's defeat carried massive implications. With just 947 points separating her and world number 1 Aryna Sabalenka before the tournament, Rybakina needed at least a quarter-final run to challenge for the top ranking. Her third-round exit meant Sabalenka would remain world number 1 regardless of how deep she went. The Kazakh star had been hoping to follow her Australian Open triumph in January by winning Wimbledon for the second time. Instead, she became the highest seed to fall so far. "Definitely I need to analyze and change something because it's not working," Rybakina admitted after her loss. But as devastating as Rybakina's exit was, it wasn't the day's biggest story. That honor belonged to a Filipina who had never won a main draw match at Wimbledon before this year. And as the sun began to set on SW19, the defending champion was about to learn that she was next. The roar of center court was deafening. The sea of red, white, and blue had turned the most iconic stadium in tennis into a home away from home. And at the center of it all stood Alexandra Eala, a 21-year-old from Quezon City who was about to deliver the performance of a lifetime. An hour earlier, the women's draw had been shaken when second seed Elena Rybakina fell to Elise Mertens. But that was just the opening act. Now, the defending champion herself was walking onto center court, and the tennis world was about to witness something extraordinary. From the very first point, it was clear this would be no ordinary match. Eala, the 29th seed, came out fearless. She had already proven she could beat Swiatek before, in the Miami Open quarterfinals of 2025, a victory that transformed her profile and made her a national sporting sensation. But this was different. This was center court. This was Wimbledon. This was the defending champion. Swiatek struck first, nailing a forehand pass on the line to break for a 2-1 lead. The center court crowd, packed with Filipino flags, held its breath, but Eala refused to break. She broke right back, showing off her tactical acumen with a high moonball return and an angled pass off Swiatek's drive volley. Superb returning enabled Eala to break again for 5-3, where she held her first set point. But Swiatek, the champion she was, locked in and produced 3 consecutive forehand winners to escape and level at 5-5. The momentum swung back and forth like a pendulum. Both players refused to give an inch. Swiatek squandered a break point for 6-5 with a missed return, and the set headed to a tiebreak. And what a tiebreak it was. Eala built a 5-2 lead, courtesy of relentless returning. The center court crowd roared. The Filipino fans were on their feet. But Swiatek, as champions do, clawed her way back with a 4-point run to reach set point. Eala saved that with an unreturned serve. She saved another as Swiatek netted a forehand. And finally, on her 4th set point, Eala sealed it as Swiatek mishit a forehand long. The first set was hers, 84 minutes of tennis that would be remembered for generations. The opening set of Eala's win was an instant classic, the WTA would later write. Momentum swung back and forth between the two competitors as each responded to the other by raising their game. Swiatek smiled at the end of the set, but it was a smile of disbelief. She was soon shouting at her entourage in the stands. The defending champion was rattled. Eala, meanwhile, soaked up the roaring applause from a thoroughly entertained crowd. She gestured for more noise. She was in her element. She was where she belonged. The second set was pure dominance. Eala pressed her foot to the floor and never let up. She broke early, raced to 4-0, and never looked back. Swiatek's quality dipped in and out. She rescued one of the breaks and gave it away in the next game. She finished the match with 44 unforced errors and 5 double faults to just 1 ace. Eala served for the match. Swiatek put her under pressure, saving 2 match points. But Eala was the braver of the pair on the break points. On her 3rd match point, she delivered the knockout blow, a forehand winner that sealed the victory. She threw herself to the ground and covered her face with her hands. The tears flowed. The crowd erupted. History had been made. To understand the magnitude of Eala's achievement, you have to understand where she came from. The Philippines is not known for its grass tennis courts. In fact, the country has virtually no grass courts at all. Eala, a 21-year-old from Quezon City, spent her early years playing on a makeshift tennis court that was painted over a basketball court. There would be basketball hoops, so I couldn't really step back a lot because then I would hit the basketball hoop, she recalled after her victory. The surface itself was a chaotic blend: crushed seashells, sand, and clay. It feels like clay, she once explained. That cramped, unconventional court didn't limit her game. It defined it. Because she couldn't step back without hitting a basketball pole, Eala had no choice but to take the ball early. She learned to react quickly, think fast on her feet, and develop the aggressive, time-stealing style that has become her trademark. When world know. 5 Jessica Pegula watched Eala's game up close. She understood immediately. She takes the ball so early. Now we know it's the basketball hoops. The very obstacle that should have hindered her development became the crucible that forged her most potent weapon. Eala didn't start competing on grass until the juniors, and even then, it was just 2 weeks a year. I did not grow up on grass in the Philippines, she said plainly. Last year was the first time she truly experienced a full grass season. Her grandfather coached her for the first decade of her career. Her parents would take her to compete internationally. And tennis was more than just a sport, it was a way to bond with family. At 13, she left home to train at the Rafa Nadal Academy in Mallorca. The same academy where 3 years later, Iga Swiatek would hand her a graduation diploma and tell her to be tenacious. I went to train every day after school with my ruffled socks, light-up shoes, and chubby cheeks. To younger me, this is everything, Eala said in her on-court interview. This goes out to them, my family, and all the girls with ruffled socks and chubby cheeks. It means the world. The girl who learned to play on crushed seashells and sand, dodging basketball hoops, had just conquered center court, and her words left an entire nation in tears. The tears had dried, the center court crowd had dispersed, but the significance of what Alex Eala had just accomplished was only beginning to sink in. She had defeated the defending champion. She had become the first player from the Philippines to reach the 4th round of a Grand Slam in the Open era. She had secured at least £300,000, more than P24 million, in prize money. And she had done it all on the biggest stage in tennis. But the journey was far from over. Standing between Eala and the quarterfinals was Jasmine Paolini, the No. 13 seed from Italy and the 2024 Wimbledon runner-up. The Italian had just demolished Maria Sakkari 6-1, 6-2 in just 66 minutes, preserving both her energy and momentum. She was a 2-time Grand Slam finalist, a 3-time WTA champion, and a player who had been here before. Eala had faced Paolini once before. In February 2026, in the second round of the Dubai Duty-Free Tennis Championships, the Filipina had taken down the then-world number 8 in front of a raucous, sold-out crowd, winning 6-1, 7-6-5. She had saved 2 set points in the second set before closing it out. Paolini knew exactly what was coming. She had already admitted that Eala's game fits very well to grass and called her a very dangerous player. I think she's like a star of our sport, the Italian had said. But the Filipina was not about to let the moment pass. She had just beaten the defending champion. She had made history for the Philippines. She was far from satisfied. I don't know how to describe it, Eala said after her victory over Swiatek. I'm into the second week of a slam, and it's amazing. A win against Paolini on Monday would make her the first Filipino, male or female, to reach the Grand Slam quarterfinals since Felicissimo Ampon pulled off the feat in the 1953 French Open. The weight of history was on her shoulders. But if there was one thing Alex Eala had proven throughout her Wimbledon run, it was that she thrived under pressure. The tennis world was watching. The Philippines was watching. And Alex Eala was ready to write the next chapter of her extraordinary story. She didn't just beat the defending champion. She sent shockwaves through the entire women's draw, and when the dust settled on center court, even the world knew. 2 was left stunned, not because she lost her own match, but because she watched a 21-year-old from the Philippines rewrite history in front of her eyes. Elena Rybakina had come to Wimbledon as the Australian Open champion, the number 2 seed and one of the heavy favorites to lift the Venus Rosewater dish for a second time. But as she walked off court 1 after her own shock exit, the news from center court hit her like a thunderbolt. Alexandra Eala had just dismantled Iga Swiatek, the defending champion, in straight sets. The bottom half of the women's draw had been blown wide open. Rybakina's own hopes of a second Wimbledon crown and a shot at the world no. One ranking had evaporated in a 7-6-4, 6-1 loss to Elise Mertens, but the story that would dominate headlines wasn't her defeat. It was the fearless Filipina who had just made history on center court. Eala threw herself to the ground and covered her face with her hands after saving 4 break points before converting her 3rd match point in a lengthy final game. She had become the first player from the Philippines to reach the 4th round of a Grand Slam in the Open era. She had improved her record against top 10 opponents to 7-4, including a perfect 3-0 on grass this season. And she had sent a message to the entire tennis world that the Eala effect was no longer just a phenomenon, it was a force.